My fiancé locked me in a cabin to force custody papers, so I outwitted him, exposed his plan in court, and watched him get sentenced. I thought I was about to get the proposal of my dreams, until he pulled out those papers instead of a ring. My name is Clara Reynolds, and I'm 30 years old. For the past 8 months, I'd been dating Ethan Caldwell, a successful lawyer who seemed like everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. He was charming, intelligent, financially stable, and most importantly, he appeared to genuinely love my 6-year-old daughter, Lily. As a single mother and elementary school teacher, finding someone who embraced both me and my child felt like winning the lottery. Ethan had been hinting about our future together for weeks, dropping not-so-subtle comments about marriage and family. When he suggested a romantic weekend getaway to a secluded cabin in the mountains, I was practically glowing with anticipation. "Just the two of us," he'd said with that confident smile that always made my heart skip. "We need to talk about some important things." I was convinced he was planning to propose. I arranged for my mother to watch Lily, packed my nicest dress, and spent way too much money on new lingerie. The drive to the cabin was beautiful, winding mountain roads surrounded by towering pines and golden autumn leaves. Ethan seemed unusually quiet, but I attributed it to nervousness. After all, proposing was a big step for any man. The cabin was perfect, rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace and panoramic views of the valley below. We had dinner by candlelight, and I kept waiting for him to get down on one knee. Instead, after we finished eating, Ethan stood up and walked to his briefcase. "Clara," he said, his tone suddenly businesslike, "there's something we need to discuss." He pulled out a thick manila folder and set it on the table between us. My heart was racing, thinking maybe the ring was hidden inside. But when he opened it, instead of a jewelry box, I saw legal documents, lots of them. "What is this?" I asked, confused. Ethan sat back down, but his demeanor had completely changed. The warm, affectionate man I'd been dating was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "These are custody relinquishment papers," he said matter-of-factly. "I need you to sign them." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Custody relinquishment? For what?" "For Lily. You'd be giving up your parental rights so that when we get married I can legally adopt her without any complications from her biological father." My blood ran cold. Lily's father had never been in the picture. He'd disappeared before she was even born, and I'd never pursued child support or tried to contact him. There were no complications to worry about. "Ethan, that doesn't make sense. Her father signed away his rights years ago. There's no legal barrier to you adopting her if we get married." His jaw tightened slightly. "It's more complicated than that, Clara. My family has concerns about the irregularities in your situation. This would clean everything up, make it official. My parents are prepared to set up a substantial trust fund for Lily's education, but only if the legal situation is crystal clear." I stared at the papers, my mind racing. Something felt terribly wrong. "What do you mean, irregularities? And why would I need to give up my rights for you to adopt her? That's not how adoption works." "Look," Ethan said, his voice taking on an edge of impatience. "I've consulted with the best family law attorneys in the state. This is the cleanest way to handle things. You'd still be her mother in every way that matters, but legally it protects everyone involved." I picked up the documents and started reading. The legal language was dense and confusing, but certain phrases jumped out at me. Complete relinquishment of parental rights, no future claim to custody, waiver of all maternal privileges. This wasn't adoption paperwork. This was giving away my daughter. "Ethan, this says I'd have no legal relationship to Lily at all. You'd be her only legal parent. That's just legal terminology. It doesn't change anything between you and her. It changes everything. If something happened to you, I'd have no rights to my own daughter. If we broke up, I could lose her completely." Ethan's mask slipped further. "Nothing's going to happen to me, Clara, and we're not going to break up. We're building a life together." I set the papers down with shaking hands. "I'm not signing these." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stared at me for a long moment, and I watched something shift in his expression, like he was recalculating, adjusting his strategy. "I was hoping you'd be more reasonable about this," he said finally. "Reasonable? You're asking me to sign away my rights to my own child. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust us. My family can give Lily opportunities you never could. private schools, college tuition, connections that will set her up for life. Isn't that what any mother would want? I want what's best for my daughter, but I'm her mother. I'm not signing away my rights to her for anyone. Ethan stood up abruptly, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely angry. You're being selfish, Clara. You're putting your own insecurities ahead of Lily's future. I'm being a mother. You're being emotional and irrational. This is exactly why these papers are necessary in the first place. I felt like I'd been slapped. What's that supposed to mean? It means that you're not thinking clearly. You're a teacher making $35,000 a year, living in a one-bedroom apartment. I'm offering you and Lily a chance at a real life. Security, stability, a future. All I'm asking is that you show some maturity and think about what's actually best for your daughter. The condescension in his voice was like ice water in my veins. This wasn't the man I'd fallen in love with. This was someone else entirely, someone who'd been hiding behind a carefully constructed facade. I need some air, I said, standing up. But when I moved toward the door, Ethan stepped in front of me. I think you should sit back down. We're not done talking about this. Yes, we are. This conversation is over. Clara. His voice was quiet now, but there was something threatening in it. You're not thinking this through. Lily is back in town with your mother right now. Alone. It would be terrible if something happened to disrupt that arrangement. My heart stopped. What did you just say? I'm saying that I've already spoken with my colleagues about this situation. There are concerns about your fitness as a mother, your financial instability, your history of poor judgment in relationships, your inability to provide adequate supervision. You're threatening me. I'm explaining reality. I have documentation of times when Lily has come to school with inadequate lunches, wearing clothes that don't fit properly. I have photos of your apartment showing unsafe living conditions. I have witness statements about your parenting methods. I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. You've been collecting evidence against me? I've been documenting facts. Facts that could be very compelling in a custody hearing. What custody hearing? You're not her father. Not yet. But I could petition the court for emergency custody based on concerns about her welfare, especially if her mother was exhibiting unstable behavior, like disappearing for a weekend and becoming violent when confronted with reasonable requests. The pieces were clicking into place with horrifying clarity. This whole weekend, the romantic cabin, the isolation, it was all planned. He'd brought me here to force me to sign those papers, and if I refused, he had backup plans. You never loved me, I whispered. I care about you, Clara. But I love Lily. She deserves better than what you can give her, and I'm in a position to provide that. This doesn't have to be adversarial. Sign the papers and we can all move forward as a family. And if I don't, then we'll have to do this the hard way. And trust me, you don't want that. I know family law better than you know anything, and I have resources you can't even imagine. How long do you think you could fight me in court? How much would that cost? What would it do to Lily to be caught in the middle of a custody battle? I felt trapped, claustrophobic, like the walls of the cabin were closing in on me. I walked to the window and looked out at the darkness beyond. We were miles from civilization, and I just realized that the man I'd trusted with my heart was actually a predator who'd been stalking my daughter. I need to use the bathroom, I said. Ethan nodded, but I noticed he watched me carefully as I walked down the hallway. The bathroom was small, with a tiny window that was painted shut. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and tried to think. My phone had no signal up here. I'd noticed that when we arrived, but hadn't thought much of it. Now it felt sinister. I had to get out of here. I had to get back to Lily. When I emerged from the bathroom, Ethan was standing in the hallway with his arms crossed. Feeling better? Actually, I think I'm coming down with something. I should probably head home. I don't think that's a good idea. The roads up here can be dangerous at night, and you seem agitated. Why don't you sleep on it? We can continue our discussion in the morning when you're thinking more clearly. I want to leave now. I'm afraid I can't let you do that. The words hung in the air between us like a threat. What do you mean you can't let me? I mean it wouldn't be safe. For you or for Lily. You're clearly not in a stable frame of mind right now. I tried to walk past him toward the front door, but he blocked my path. When I tried to go around him, he grabbed my arm. Let go of me. Clara, you need to calm down. Let go of me right now or I'll scream. Go ahead. We're 20 miles from the nearest neighbor. That's when I knew I was in real trouble. This wasn't about marriage or adoption or even custody. This was about control. Ethan had lured me to this isolated place to force me into giving up my daughter, and he wasn't planning to let me leave until I complied. I jerked my arm free and ran for the front door, but it was locked with a deadbolt that required a key from the inside. I fumbled with the lock, but Ethan was behind me in seconds. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said, grabbing my shoulders. I spun around and shoved him as hard as I could. He stumbled backward, giving me enough space to run toward the back of the cabin. There had to be another way out. A back door, another window, something. But the back door was also locked with a key deadbolt, and the windows were the old-fashioned kind with painted shut frames. I was trapped. "Clara!" Ethan's voice carried through the cabin. "This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior I've been documenting. You're proving my point about your instability." I found myself in the bedroom frantically looking for anything I could use as a weapon or a way to escape. That's when I saw Ethan's briefcase open on the dresser, and what I found inside made my blood freeze. There were photos, dozens of them. Pictures of me and Lily at the grocery store, at the park, walking to school. Pictures taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, like I was some kind of surveillance target. There were printed emails between Ethan and someone named Jay Caldwell, probably his father, discussing the acquisition and securing the asset, but the most chilling thing was a manila folder labeled Phase 2. Inside were legal documents already prepared for emergency custody, affidavits from witnesses claiming I was an unfit mother, and a psychiatric evaluation request. He'd been planning this for months. There was also a small digital recorder. When I turned it on, I heard my own voice from conversations I'd had with Ethan over the past few weeks. Conversations where I'd expressed doubts about my parenting abilities, mentioned being overwhelmed, complained about money troubles. He'd been secretly recording me, editing together sound bites to make me look unstable. "Clara?" Ethan's voice was closer now. "Where are you? We really need to finish our conversation." I quickly photographed the most damning documents with my phone, even though I had no signal to send them anywhere. Then I slipped the digital recorder into my pocket. Ethan appeared in the bedroom doorway. "There you are. I see you've been going through my things. You've been stalking us. You've been planning this for months. I've been preparing to give Lily the life she deserves. A life with people who can actually take care of her. I take care of her perfectly fine. Do you? When's the last time she had new clothes? When's the last time you could afford to take her somewhere special? When's the last time you didn't worry about paying bills or making rent?" His words stung because they contained just enough truth to hurt. I did worry about money. I did shop at thrift stores for Lily's clothes. I did work extra tutoring jobs just to make ends meet. But that didn't make me an unfit mother. Loving your child isn't about money. Love doesn't pay for college. Love doesn't open doors. Love doesn't give her the connections she'll need to succeed in life. And what about my love? What happens to that when you steal her from me? You'll always be part of her life, Clara. Just in a different capacity. As what? A family friend? Someone who gets to see her on holidays if you feel like allowing it? Ethan's expression softened slightly, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd thought I loved. "It doesn't have to be like that. We could still get married. You could still be her mother in every way that matters. This is just about making things legal and proper. But if I don't sign, you'll take her anyway. I'll do what's best for Lily, with or without your cooperation." I realized then that he'd been honest about one thing. He did love Lily, but his love was possessive, controlling, toxic. He saw her as an object to be acquired rather than a person with her own needs and relationships, and he saw me as an obstacle to be removed. "I need some time to think," I said finally. Ethan nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need. We have all weekend." But I could see in his eyes that my time was running out. If I didn't sign those papers willingly, he was prepared to escalate things. I thought about the documents I'd seen, the prepared custody filing, the psychiatric evaluation request. He'd already laid the groundwork to destroy my life. "I'm going to make some coffee," I said. "This is a lot to process." "That sounds like a good idea. I'll be in the living room if you need anything." In the kitchen I tried to form a plan. The car keys were in Ethan's pocket. I'd seen him put them there when we arrived. The landline phone was disconnected. My cell phone was useless without signal. But there had to be something I could do. That's when I remembered the spare key. When we'd first arrived, Ethan had retrieved the cabin key from under a fake rock by the front steps. Most people who hid spare keys hid them in multiple places. If I could find another key, I could unlock the door and escape. I made coffee and brought Ethan a cup, playing the role of the compliant girlfriend considering his proposal. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him. "About Lily's future." His face lit up with hope. And maybe you're right. Maybe I have been putting my own feelings ahead of what's best for her. I'm so glad you're starting to see reason. But I need to know more about what this would look like. The trust fund, the schools, the opportunities you mentioned. For the next hour, I listened to Ethan describe his family's plans for Lily. The private schools they'd selected, the summer camps, the college preparatory programs. It was clear he'd thought this through in detail, and equally clear that none of those plans included me in any meaningful way. While he talked, I watched him carefully. He was relaxing, getting comfortable, convinced that he was winning. When he got up to use the bathroom, I quickly searched the kitchen drawers and found what I was looking for: a spare key ring with several keys on it. When Ethan returned, I was back at the table, staring thoughtfully at the custody papers. "I think I'm ready to sign," I said quietly. Really, but I want to read through everything one more time, make sure I understand all the terms." "Of course, take your time." I pretended to read while Ethan waited eagerly beside me. When I was sure he was completely absorbed in his victory, I stood up abruptly. "Actually, I need to use the bathroom first. This is a big decision, and I want to be completely clear-headed." "Sure, of course." In the bathroom, I quietly tested the keys from the spare ring until I found one that unlocked the door. Then I flushed the toilet and ran the water to cover any sounds. When I came back out, I sat down at the table again and picked up the pen. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked. "I'm sure," I said. "I want what's best for Lily." I signed my name on the first page, and Ethan's smile was triumphant. But what he didn't realize was that I'd signed Clarabelle Ringwald, a completely fake name. The document was worthless. "There," I said, setting down the pen. "It's done." Ethan gathered up the papers eagerly. "You've made the right choice, Clara. You'll see. This is going to be wonderful for all of us." "I hope so," I said. Then I stood up and stretched. "I'm exhausted. I think I need to lie down for a while." "Of course, you've had a long day." I went to the bedroom and closed the door. Then I waited. 20 minutes later, I heard the sound I'd been hoping for. Ethan's soft snoring from the living room couch. Moving as quietly as possible, I crept out of the bedroom and tiptoed to the front door. The spare key turned smoothly in the lock, and suddenly I was outside in the cool mountain air. Ethan's car was parked in the driveway, but the keys were still in his pocket. However, I'd noticed earlier that he'd left the windows cracked slightly. It took me several precious minutes, but I managed to manipulate the window enough to reach inside and unlock the door. The car started on the first try, but the sound of the engine seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. I put it in gear and drove as quickly as I dared down the dark mountain road, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't stop driving until I reached the highway, and I didn't feel safe until I saw the lights of the city ahead of me. It was nearly 3 in the morning when I pulled into my mother's driveway. "Clara?" My mother appeared at the door in her bathrobe, looking concerned. "What are you doing here? I thought you were staying at the cabin until Sunday." "Mom, I need to get Lily and I need to call the police." "What happened? You look terrible." Ethan tried to force me to sign papers giving up custody of Lily. When I refused, he locked me in the cabin and threatened me. My mother's face went white. "Oh my God. Come inside. Lily's asleep in the guest room." While my mother made coffee, I called 911 and reported what had happened. The dispatcher took my information and said they'd send officers to check on the cabin, though they warned me that without more evidence it would be difficult to prove criminal intent. Next, I called my friend Jessica, who was a family law attorney. Even though it was the middle of the night, she answered on the third ring. "Clara, what's wrong?" I told her everything, and she listened without interruption. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Clara, this is serious, really serious. You need to file for a restraining order first thing Monday morning, and you need to document everything. Write down exactly what happened, what he said, what documents you saw." "I took pictures," I said, pulling out my phone. "And I have this." I played her the digital recorder I'd taken from Ethan's briefcase. Her sharp intake of breath told me she understood the implications. "This is evidence of premeditation. He's been planning this for months, documenting you, building a case. Clara, if you hadn't escaped when you did, what would have happened? I think he would have kept you there until you broke down and signed those papers. and once you had, it would have been very difficult to prove you signed under duress. The next few days were a blur of police reports, legal consultations, and security preparations. I took time off work and stayed at my mother's house with Lily, too frightened to return to our apartment. Ethan called repeatedly, leaving voicemails that started apologetic and became increasingly threatening. "Clara, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We need to talk about this rationally. Then, you're making a huge mistake. You can't hide from this forever. Finally, you have no idea what you're up against." I tried to do this the easy way. Jessica filed for an emergency restraining order on Monday morning, and we were in court that afternoon. I brought the photos, the recordings, and my written account of what had happened at the cabin. Ethan showed up with his own lawyer, looking composed and professional in his expensive suit. When it was his turn to speak, he painted me as an unstable woman who had misunderstood a romantic gesture and was now vindictively trying to destroy his reputation. "Your Honor," his lawyer said, "my client is a respected member of the bar who was simply trying to discuss potential adoption procedures with his girlfriend. Ms. Reynolds has clearly misinterpreted his intentions and is now making false accusations based on her own emotional instability." But when the judge heard the recordings, both the conversations where Ethan had threatened me and the edited recordings he'd made of me without my knowledge, his demeanor changed completely. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, "are you telling this court that you were secretly recording private conversations with Ms. Reynolds?" Ethan's lawyer whispered something to him urgently. "Your Honor, my client was documenting concerning behavior for potential custody proceedings." "What custody proceedings? You have no legal relationship to this child. We were engaged to be married, Your Honor." "Were you, Ms. Reynolds? Did Mr. Caldwell propose marriage to you?" "No, Your Honor, he never proposed. He only asked me to sign custody relinquishment papers." The judge reviewed the documents I'd photographed, and his expression grew increasingly stern. "Mr. Caldwell, these appear to be comprehensive legal documents prepared well in advance of your conversation with Ms. Reynolds. How do you explain this level of preparation for what you claim was a simple discussion?" Ethan's lawyer looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor, my client is a thorough person who likes to be prepared for various contingencies. Various contingencies including emergency custody filings and psychiatric evaluations for a woman you claim to love?" The hearing lasted 2 hours, and by the end, Ethan's carefully constructed facade had completely crumbled. The judge granted the restraining order and scheduled a follow-up hearing to review the criminal aspects of the case. Outside the courthouse, Jessica squeezed my arm. "You did it, Clara. He can't come near you or Lily." But I knew this was just the beginning. Ethan was a lawyer with connections and resources, and he wouldn't give up easily. Over the next few weeks, I discovered just how deep his obsession ran. A private investigator contacted me to let me know that Ethan had hired him months earlier to surveil me and Lily. The man was disgusted when he realized what the information was being used for and offered to testify about Ethan's instructions to find dirt on my parenting. My landlord called to tell me that Ethan had approached him about my lease, claiming to be my fiancé, and asking about any complaints or issues with my tenancy. Lily's school principal reached out to say that a man matching Ethan's description had been asking questions about Lily's attendance and academic performance, claiming to be conducting a routine family welfare check. Each revelation made it clearer that Ethan's plan had been months in the making, and that he'd been studying us like specimens in a lab, looking for weaknesses he could exploit. The criminal charges took longer to process, but eventually Ethan was indicted on charges of stalking, making terroristic threats, and attempted fraud. The case made local news, and suddenly other women came forward with similar stories about Ethan's controlling behavior in previous relationships. His law firm placed him on indefinite suspension pending the outcome of the criminal case. The state bar opened its own investigation into his conduct. His carefully built professional reputation crumbled almost overnight. But the most satisfying moment came during his sentencing hearing, 6 months after that terrifying night at the cabin. The judge sentenced Ethan to 2 years in prison and 5 years of probation, with a permanent restraining order protecting me and Lily. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, "you used your position as an attorney and your personal relationship with Ms. Reynolds to attempt one of the most heinous violations of trust I have ever encountered in my courtroom. You attempted to steal a child from her mother through manipulation, fraud, and intimidation. This court finds your actions reprehensible and your complete lack of remorse disturbing." Ethan stood there in his orange jumpsuit, no longer the confident, controlling man who had tried to trap me in that cabin. He looked small and defeated, and for the first time since I'd known him, powerless. After the hearing, Lily and I walked out of the courthouse hand in hand. She still didn't fully understand what had happened. I'd told her that Ethan had been confused about some grown-up things, and that we wouldn't be seeing him anymore. But she seemed relieved not to have to pretend to like him anymore. "Mommy," she said as we got in the car, "are we safe now?" "Yes, baby, we're safe now." 6 months later, we moved to a new city where I'd found a teaching position at a school with better pay and benefits. We rented a small house with a yard where Lily could play, and slowly, we built a new life. I still have trust issues. I probably always will. The idea that someone could fake love so convincingly, could plan such an elaborate deception, still keeps me awake some nights. But I've also learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. When it mattered most, when my daughter's life was on the line, I found the courage to fight back, and the intelligence to escape. Lily is 8 now, thriving in her new school and blissfully unaware of how close she came to being stolen from me. Sometimes I look at her, laughing with her friends, confidently raising her hand in class, hugging me goodnight, and I think about the alternate universe where Ethan succeeded, where she grew up believing that her mother had abandoned her willingly, where she was raised by people who saw her as a prize to be won rather than a person to be loved. The thought still makes me sick, but it also makes me grateful. Grateful that I trusted my instincts when something felt wrong. Grateful that I was brave enough to run when I had the chance. Grateful that I fought for my daughter when it mattered most. I've learned that the most dangerous people aren't always strangers lurking in dark alleys. Sometimes they're the ones who bring you flowers and tell you they love you. Sometimes they're the ones who seem too good to be true because they are. And sometimes the person who seems like your salvation is actually your predator. But I've also learned that mothers are fierce when their children are threatened. That love really can conquer manipulation and control. That sometimes the scariest thing you can do, running into the unknown, is actually the bravest thing you can do. Today, Lily asked me if I ever want to get married again. I told her that maybe someday I'll meet someone who loves both of us exactly as we are. Someone who doesn't want to change us or control us or steal pieces of our lives. Someone who understands that our little family is already complete, and that any additions would be just that. Additions, not replacements. Until then, we're doing just fine on our own. Because I finally learned the most important lesson of all, sometimes the person trying to rescue you is the one you actually need to be rescued from.